One morning, I woke up to a nightmare. Heather, my wife of 22 years, was planning a week in Paris with another man. She flaunted her betrayal, claiming it was her one extraordinary memory. I was shattered, but then I got angry. I devised a ruthless plan to expose them. I leaked their affair to the press, turning their romantic getaway into a public scandal. The powerful CEO and my unfaithful wife became the talk of the town. Their reputations destroyed. They had no idea who they were dealing with. This is my story. Watch the reckoning unfold. The tempter's name was Vanity. My wife fell for it far too easily. Heather was always cute, but a bit on the heavier side. After the kids moved out, she started to exercise. At first, it was just to fill her time. But then everything changed. The more she worked out, the better she looked. Her body became very important to her. She felt like a new woman. That's when the flirting started. For 22 years, we were a happy couple. We enjoyed each other's company at social events. We would dance together at parties. But now, there was a big difference between my attractive wife and her out-of-shape husband, and we started to drift apart. Heather had many good-looking men around her. It was never just one man. She was chatting and dancing with all of them. Meanwhile, she hardly talked to her old friends anymore. They went from feeling hurt to giving me sad looks. But honestly, what could I do? Her actions didn't seem openly unfaithful. She would dance with younger, fitter, and better-looking guys than me. But there was never any real love between them. She just seemed to be having a good time. It was clear she was happier than I could remember. I thought about waiting it out. I had heard of a thing called middle-aged craziness, and I hoped it would soon be over for her. But soon it became obvious that Heather's new confidence had changed her in deep ways. First, she started to act very self-centered. Heather couldn't stop looking at herself and showing off her body. Then came her big ego. She felt special, like she was a prize, and she knew it. She acted like she could have any man she wanted. Even though this was really disrespectful to me, other wives didn't like her at all. But Heather didn't care. Heather's sudden change was easy to see. One moment, she was just a typical American housewife. The next, she was the center of attention for a group of confident men. The big change from being a homemaker to someone who feels powerful and confident can really change how a person sees themselves in the world. This new way of thinking started to affect her choices, and that opened the door for unexpected changes. One Friday morning, she came downstairs. I was enjoying my breakfast bagel. Her hair was messy, and she wore her old, worn robe. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat across from me. I noticed her serious look, and I thought, uh-oh, this might not be good. She said, "Tom, there's something I need to talk to you about." Those words never feel good for a husband to hear. So I put my bagel down and paid close attention. She said, "I have never felt like I had my own identity. I have always been known as Tommy Jr., S-Mom, Susie's mom, and your wife. But now I have changed. I am my own person now." She paused, waiting for me to ask something. I said, "What does that mean?" She replied, "When we first met, I was shy and kept to myself. I had some boyfriends, but I was just average. In fact, I think our shared lack of charm made us a good match. We have lived a completely ordinary life for the last 22 years. She stood up and opened her robe. She had nothing on underneath. Her strong legs, toned sides, flat stomach, and full chest were impressive. She ran her hands down her beautiful body and said proudly, "I'm not shy anymore." She closed her robe and sat down again. She looked at me as if she wanted me to understand her. She said, "Men try to flirt with me all the time. I ignore them because I love you. But one special man has asked me to go somewhere amazing." She paused, lowered her head, and whispered, "And forgive me, but I am going to accept his offer." I already had an idea of what this talk was about. I felt anger rising in me, but I kept it under control and asked, "So what does that mean?" She looked at me with hope and said, "You don't know him." We met at the club. Since then, we've had lunch together a few times. He's always been very polite, I said with some anger. "So he hasn't tried anything with you yet?" She looked upset and replied, "There's no need to use such words. It's not like that. He's older, very rich, and knows a lot about the world. He just wants my company." I was surprised by her words. She quickly added, "He invited me to go to Paris with him next week. I'm going. It will just be this one time. He's married." I said, let me understand this. You know he's married and you're married too, right? Isn't that the definition of cheating? She sighed and said, it's not like that. I'm only going with him this one time. It's a chance I can't miss. After that, I'll be yours forever. I promise I'll make it up to you. You'll see, she said seriously. But I need to have one amazing memory to put in my scrapbook before time takes it away from me. She looked at her body again. I could tell she was worried about getting older. I replied, that's not right, Heather. This guy isn't a nice guy, and what he wants isn't sweet. He only wants to be with you for fun. All you will get from this are some exciting moments and a few mementos from Paris. I paused for a moment and added, trying to sound stronger than I felt, because I won't be here when you come back. She looked upset and said, don't say that, Tom. You love me, and I know you do. You will let me do this because we care about each other. I'm not hiding anything from you. Just let me have this one dreamy adventure and you'll never regret it. She was wrong. I already felt regret. I took her left hand in both of mine and gently touched her wedding ring. I said honestly, I love you. If we count our courtship, we have had 24 great years together. We have 2 amazing kids. So all I can do is ask you, please don't do this. She looked sad and replied, I will always love you, Tom. We will grow old together and spoil our grandchildren. But I am leaving for Paris on Monday. Her words hit me like a lightning bolt of worry. I asked desperately, is there any way I can change your mind? She looked at me like a parent might look at a confused child and said firmly, it is going to happen. The plans are already set. I stood up without saying anything else and walked out the front door. She called after me, Tom! It was the same whiny tone teenagers use when their parents aren't being fair. I kept walking. I drove to the county park. I don't usually cry, but my stomach felt like it was turning over. I opened the car door and threw my bagel on the ground in the parking lot. I wiped my mouth and sat there looking at the same green yard where I had watched my kids play a long time ago. You never think it will happen to you, so you never make a plan. I thought about my situation. I had nowhere to go. Where would I stay? I earn a good salary, but with 2 kids in college and a comfortable life, we barely make ends meet. Our savings were small, and our credit cards were almost full. I have no family and no close friends. In short, it was either stay in the house or sleep in the car. Heather knew about our money problems. I think that was one reason why she felt sure she could do this. I felt hopeless, alone, and very lonely, like a dark cloud was over me. I said to myself, I put my heart and soul into this woman, and now she is using me like this? That thought brought me back to reality and made me stand tall. I am not someone who will easily accept being a victim. I am sure about my business choices. If Heather could make decisions on her own, then I could too. But first, I wanted to get some free legal advice. I called my friend Jim Edgerton. He is also a lawyer. I said, Jim, it's Tommy Meisner. There was a short pause before he replied, What's up, Tom? I laughed and asked, Do you know a good lawyer? He answered, Need divorce advice? It was more of a statement than a question. I said, It sounds like you knew this. Jim replied, Unfortunately, yes. Heather has been seen with Charlie Wilkins. You know him. Of course, I knew him. Everyone in town knew him. He was the boss at the biggest company around. He was in his 60s, tall, looked important, and had a bad reputation with women. His wife, Maeve Wilkins, was important too. If she liked you, it helped your reputation. If she didn't, people shunned you. I thought to myself, Heather, what trouble have you gotten into? When I got home, the house was empty. Heather was either at the club or out to lunch. I thought it was still just lunch. Wilkins was too close for a casual meeting. That was not why we came to Paris. She was already starting to pack. The cute nightgowns and pretty lingerie were surprising. I had never seen anything like it before. It made me feel a bit dizzy, so I had to sit down for a moment. I tried to pretend I was reading a book when she walked in. She looked amazing in her nice workout clothes. I thought I might look that good too, if I didn't spend so much time stuck at my desk for work. She walked towards the stairs, humming a cheerful tune. Then she noticed me and looked really happy. She came over, stood in front of me, and said, Let me take a shower and you can join me. It was clear she was excited. I looked up at her, pretending she had caught me off guard, and said, I'd love to. I'm at a really exciting part of this book, so I'm going to have to say no. She understood and replied, "Don't be so grumpy. This is still your story." She looked great in her tight workout clothes. I tried to look interested and said, "Seriously, I'll pass." For a moment, she looked angry and a bit hurt. Then she looked determined. She said, "Fine, act how you want. It won't change anything." Then she stomped upstairs. The weekend was tough. Heather kept pretending that next week wasn't a big deal. She acted like I was just being a bad kid for trying to ruin her fun. It bothered me that she thought whatever was going on wouldn't affect anything. I tried my best to keep away from her. She seemed like a different person now. That person seemed cold and unfeeling. She even tried to feel sorry for me. She showed me some things she had saved for someone else. It didn't seem to bother me at all. I told myself I felt this way because I was in shock. What had happened was hard to believe. It would take time for me to deal with it. Only then would I really feel the hurt. Pride can be very dangerous. Heather knew she was beautiful, but she also knew that beauty doesn't last forever. In her own fairy tale, Prince Charming would come and take her away for a week filled with romance. That would prove that she was the most beautiful woman around. Then she could come back to her husband feeling good about herself. My feelings didn't matter to her story. Heather's selfish actions might have started when the kids left home. Having an empty nest is a big change for a woman, especially for a caring mother like her. Maybe she looked at her life and thought it was finally her time to shine. Or maybe she just lost her mind. No matter what the reason was, the Heather I loved would never act so selfishly. Her unclear view of what was real wasn't even the worst part. She really thought that I would just accept her mistake. She believed we could move on quickly because we loved each other. But she was totally wrong. I couldn't love a woman who thought cheating was just a part of growing as a person. Heather tried to talk about it on Sunday night. I think she wanted me to agree with her before she left. But I was done talking. I told her, "There is no excuse for what you are doing." I looked her in the eye and asked, "Do you see how wrong this is? Do you understand how big of a change this is for both of us? You're giving up 22 years of marriage, 2 kids, and a happy home for just a week of fun." She looked at me like I was being very harsh. Then she looked at me warmly and said, "You don't really believe that. You're just a little hurt. But you'll be fine. When I come back, I will make you the happiest man. You'll see. This lovely body will be all yours, and I will love you even more for letting me do this." Wow, she really thinks a lot of herself. I'm not the type of guy who thinks about hurting others, but I could think about contacting people who would do bad things. On the morning she was leaving, I was sitting at the breakfast table sipping my coffee. Heather came down the stairs full of energy. I stayed quiet. She looked amazing. She wore a nice skirt and high heels, but her silk blouse, which showed a lot of skin, was the real eye-catcher, covered by a light jacket. She walked over to me quickly. I think she was hoping for a big goodbye. It would fit her story perfectly. This part of the story shows a happy husband saying goodbye to his lovely wife. She was excited to go out and have fun, so he gave her a quick kiss on the cheek. I didn't feel like getting up, which made her a bit annoyed. Just then, a horn honked. Her face lit up and she squealed, "He's here!" At least she didn't bring him inside. She grabbed her suitcase and hurried out the front door, leaving it slightly open. I walked over to close it. She reached the limo. The man was waiting there. He looked nice, tall, and sharp. She put her hands on his chest and stood on her toes to kiss him. It was the kind of sweet hello a woman gives to her husband, but her husband was standing right behind her. Wilkins looked over at me and then smirked. He had done this many times before, and he thought it was funny. Heather turned and waved cheerfully as she got into the back seat. I didn't wave back. Instead, I closed the door on 22 years of being married. That hurt a lot. People say that today is the first day of the rest of your life, but I didn't believe that. To me, the future looked bleak and disappointing. However, I surprisingly found a way to focus on my work. The part of me that wasn't thinking about Heather threw itself into my job. It felt good to get lost in the routine of a normal workday. I decided to stop thinking about Heather. This worked well until she sent me a happy text saying they had left safely. It showed how little she understood my feelings. I worried she might keep sending me photos. So I went to the local Apple store and bought a new phone. Then I accidentally ran over my old phone as I drove out of the parking lot. I searched through the local ads for a place I could move into right away. I knew that in the long run I might end up broke. But for now, I had enough money in my pocket. I made good money and had decided to stop paying for anything tied to my old life. As the song says, freedom is just another word for nothing to lose. I felt so free that I bought a double-wide home. You can laugh all you want about trailer parks, but mine was close to my job. It had great parking, a nice deck, and was 3 times bigger than any of the apartments I had seen before. The furniture was brand new, even if it looked a bit silly. My neighbors were mostly older folks on Social Security, not a rough crowd, so it was very quiet. Almost too quiet, if you know what I mean. On Tuesday, I moved all my things into my new home. My last night in the big house was terrible. Every ghost and memory of happier times came rushing through my dreams. The pain felt unbearable. Then, in the morning, I broke free from my marriage and felt like I was starting fresh, just like my unfaithful wife. The next Monday, there was a big story in the Tribune. The headline read, "Fun in Paris." They even had a picture of the 2 cheating partners looking caught as they went through customs. The shocking details filled the news for 3 days. The articles included many rumors about Wilkins's other supposed affairs. It was all very juicy and interesting to read. It even got some attention from national news. I don't know what Wilkins expected would happen. Maybe he thought I would feel proud to be cheated on. Or perhaps he believed he was too important for someone like me to challenge him. Either way, he had a lot to learn about the dangers of arrogance. He had forgotten about the sneaky vibe in the news world. The media loves to make a big deal out of things. A big scandal is like gold for selling stories. So I used Wilkins's well-known name in his community to let the press loose. A few phone calls and some simple facts were all it took. I don't hang out with Charlie and Heather, so I didn't know the full story. Wilkins stayed married, but I heard his wife was seeing someone else. That's what the gossip papers said anyway. I was sure that Wilkins's board of directors quickly pushed him out of his job. He had become a problem as the boss. He received the usual payout for leaving, and Charlie Wilkins was now among the rich who just do nothing. I had mixed feelings. His career was over. I was behind that. But he could still take trips to Paris. Heather began calling me first thing on Tuesday. She must have tried to reach me on Monday, but that phone was run over. I knew I had to talk to her eventually, so I took a deep breath and answered. I spoke in my best serious voice. "Tommy Meisner, how can I help you?" She sounded really mad. She said, "Where have you been? I called all day yesterday and you didn't pick up." I tried to change the topic. "How was Paris? You looked great in the pictures." She shouted back, "Where are you? Where are your things? Why aren't you at home?" I laughed and replied, "What part of I won't be there when you get back? Didn't you understand?" There was a long silence. Finally, she said a bit more quietly, "I didn't think you really meant it. There's no way you would just leave after 22 years of marriage." I chuckled and said, "Oh, but I have, Heather. I have a whole new life now. And the best part? It's completely without you." There was another long pause. Her voice changed. "But please, I can't live without you. You know that." She probably didn't realize how true that was. I had used up almost all my money after paying for my move. What was left in my banks would be gone soon. She had no way to replace it. I said firmly, "You'll have to accept it, Heather. I'm completely out of your life now. I really need to get back to work." She gasped, "Wait, don't hang up. I really need to talk to you." All her confidence was gone. She sounded afraid. "I just wanted to finish this." I said, "Let's meet at Johnny's and we can talk about how to separate." She asked, "Can't you come here? I can make dinner." I replied seriously, "I will never go into that house again, especially with you there." She said quietly, "Okay. Johnny's—" "What time?" I asked. 7 o'clock? That would give me a little time to prepare for what was coming, and Heather did not let me down. All talking stopped when she walked in. Johnny's is a local hangout. When someone as beautiful as her showed up, everyone stared. She was truly stunning. She wore a tight little black dress that showed off her long, strong legs. The dress ended a little above her knees. Her face was nice, though not remarkable. But with the beauty tricks she learned in the last year, she could look like a movie star. Plus, she had a full, fit body. After she got rid of the baby weight, she found out she had a slender and long waist. The way her firm hips and rounded bottom looked made her seem even curvier than she really was. Hate is not the opposite of love. Hate means you have strong feelings against someone. Not loving someone is being completely uncaring. That's how I felt when she came over to my table. She had been very rude to me. Her way of acting before she left had made any good feelings vanish. Now, all I wanted was to get through this annoying task. She tried to slide into the booth next to me. I told her, "Heather, we can't talk like this. We have a lot of serious things to discuss." She looked at me as if I didn't understand anything and chose to sit across from me. It was clear she thought she still had the upper hand. I tried to be polite and asked, "How are you?" I could tell she wanted to talk about her trip. I saw it in her eyes. But when she saw the look in my eyes, she changed her mind. Instead, she spoke to me like she was trying to convince me. "Stop being upset and come back to the woman who cares for you. I told you that you wouldn't regret it. I'm going to work very hard to make things right for you." But I still didn't understand. I had known this woman through good times and bad, in our daily routines, and during excited moments. I loved her for 22 long years without holding back. Now, I felt empty. She had taken away everything I believed in. I believed in her. I believed in our marriage. I thought she loved me. Instead, I saw someone who thought her looks could fix every issue. I said, "You need to understand that I am never coming back. We have to figure out how to separate." She looked doubtful and said, "That's crazy. We may have had a little fight, but that's all behind us now. I am yours, and I will always be yours." Who was this person? I couldn't hide my surprise as I replied, "You think being with someone else for a week is just a little fight?" That was a clear and bold act of betrayal. The Heather I knew was caring and sweet. She would never do something like that. I looked at her sadly and said in a calm voice, "For me, the Heather I married isn't here anymore. You took her away. The selfish and tricky person you have become means nothing to me." Her face showed shock and disbelief. It probably looked a lot like mine when she first told me about her trip to Paris. She seemed really confused. I was going off the plan we had. We were meant to be happy together. That's how fairy tales go. She said, "Look at me. I'm still the same person you married, just a lot better. Haven't you liked the new look I got?" I said, "I did like it until you gave it to someone else. You were with Wilkins last week, weren't you?" She was about to say that it didn't matter, that it was just a fling. She loved me, and only me. But there was something inside her that seemed to realize the truth. She just looked at me with shame and guilt. I said tiredly, "It doesn't matter anymore. You can be with anyone you want now. I don't have any hold over you. I just need to settle our affairs. Then we can go our own ways." She looked shocked. It seemed like it was just hitting her that I meant what I said. She replied quickly and with real feeling, "I stayed true to you for 22 years. I will stay true for the rest of our lives. We have 2 wonderful kids together. How can a week change that?" Wow. Not one word of sorry, not one bit of regret. Heather, it felt like I hardly knew you. Now it was my turn to speak down to her. I said, "Really? You were ready to be with another man for a whole week and you think everything is fine now?" The talk was going nowhere. She just didn't understand. I said, "Look, Heather, I really have to go. You will need money to live, so here's what will happen. I will have Jim Edgerton give you a fair separation agreement. I owe you that for the first 22 years we had together." I added, "It's all written in the agreement. We will share everything equally. The kids might need loans for school. You will have to lower your spending. But I'm sure you can live on what I'm giving you until you find a job." Sadly, my offer did not cover gym memberships. I looked at her to make sure she was paying attention. I said, "More importantly, we need to sell the house and share the money we make from the sale. Neither of us can afford to live there anymore. But luckily, we have a lot of value in the house. We can sell it for a really good price. I already have a buyer. That way, we can both avoid bankruptcy." It was starting to sink in. You could see it on her face. First, she felt confused. Then, panic set in. She looked like she might cry as she said, "This can't be happening. How could you just leave me after so many happy years together? What will I do now?" I replied, "You are a wonderful woman, Heather. I will make this divorce quick. You will meet new men soon. I'm sure it won't take long before you find someone else." I really wanted her to move on quickly. She took a deep breath and said, "You make it sound like a business. I give my heart to a man and he takes care of me. Is that what you mean? It sounds a lot like selling myself." I said, "Well, you've been there before. What happened in Paris? You might see it as romance, but I see it as a deal. So if it fits, you might as well accept it." I stood up and she stood with me. She looked at me with hope and said with a deep wish in her voice, "Come home, Tommy. I miss our happy life together." That sounded more like the Heather I once knew. I nearly gave in. But then I thought of the new and better version of my life. So I simply said, "You'll get the papers tomorrow." Then I left her behind. In the land of Nod, the divorce was calm, like the peaceful beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944. No one was hurt. But Heather's loud dog, which Wilkins had paid for, put on quite a show in court. Heather finally understood that her easy life was over. She wanted to get as much from me as she could. On my side, my friend Jim was a great lawyer. I made a fair offer, especially since there was a big trip to Paris that everyone was talking about. To me, there was no love left for Heather, just a big pile of nothing. And that's how I felt, empty. I didn't want to bury her in the backyard. That would have given her too much respect. I just wanted to get her out of my life. I had loved her once, but the person in front of me now was not the same. We lived in a place where you could get a divorce without any blame. But the judge for our case really seemed to dislike Wilkins, maybe as much as I did. Maybe he lost to Wilkins in golf, or maybe there were other reasons. Either way, every decision the judge made was in our favor. So, Heather ended up getting the same money I had offered her at first. Selling the house made things easier for both of us and probably kept us from going into deep debt. I had a dark thought that I had gained something from my 22 years with her. The money from the house paid off all our debts and put $30,000 in each of our pockets. I guessed that Heather's money would only last her about 3 months if she kept spending like this. After that, she would have to face the boring part of life that we all call reality. Tommy Jr. and Susie were at Marquette College. Tommy was a senior and Susie was a junior. We had saved money for their college from a trust fund. So the $30,000 I got from selling the house, plus some good federal grants, would help them finish school. But Heather had spoken to them first and made the story sound better for her. Because of that, they weren't happy with me. Still, they were good kids, and I believed they would forgive me in time. After the decision was made, we all went our separate ways. I felt a bit sad, thinking about what we used to have that was now gone. Heather and I had been very close at one time. Still, I didn't want to waste any more energy trying to figure out why my life had changed so much. The reason was clear. Each one of us has to deal with the passing of time. I'm human. I grow older, and I know the feeling that life is slipping away. Heather worried about getting older, and her fears pushed aside the good parts of her. This led to trouble for both of us. I knew Heather well. I believed she wouldn't have crossed certain lines if Charlie had not pushed her to do so. Any shy person would find it hard to say no to a guy like him. He was rich, tan, and confident, while I was just an ordinary guy. To me, Charlie had a lot of wrongs to fix. Heather's reasons for what she did were just that, reasons. She turned herself into someone who would catch attention. She became an easy target for any guy who didn't care about honesty or respect. The way she gave in so easily showed me everything I needed to know about her and our marriage. So I decided to walk away without blame. But feeling lonely is a tricky feeling. Heather got married right after her divorce was final. I had expected this. She really had no other way to take care of herself. There was a 23-year age gap between them. She was 2 years younger than me, at 42. Old Bud, her new husband, was 65. He reminded me of Charlie Wilkins. Maybe Heather was drawn to older men. Now that Viagra is easy to get, I figured she found ways to deal with that. Her new husband was involved in local politics and had a job in Congress for our district. He was also friends with Wilkins. I heard from people around town that old Bud had a name for being corrupt in politics. That probably didn't bother Heather at all. She had a rich partner and appeared in the news a lot, proudly standing by him like a prize wife. I felt sick, but not because I missed the boat we used to have. It was just such a clear sign of how hurtful pride can be. The only thing that made me feel better was seeing her fake smile and the desperate look in her eyes during interviews. It reminded me of a sad pet that had been mistreated. It was nice to think that things weren't perfect for her. She had made her choices, and it felt good to think she might have to live with them forever. Maybe her rich partner and his friend were sharing her because old Charlie was definitely not happy at home anymore. Or perhaps her new husband was using her to help his career. Maybe she even felt some real sadness about her choices. Thinking about that was a gift that just kept coming back. She had tried to contact me a few times just to see if we could still be friends. I treated her calls like I would any annoying spam and mostly ignored them. But the worried look I saw on the news made me think, maybe she really thought there was a chance for us again. Like I said, she had been out of touch with reality for a while. Heather's marriage did free me from the heavy weight of money troubles, and I never lacked for friends. Any 44-year-old man who looks decent, is single, and isn't too flamboyant is surrounded by women who are looking for the same. That's because most of the available men are busy dating much younger women. I was surrounded by lovely and graceful older women. But there was a big problem. All my plans for the future had fallen apart, and I felt lost. Most guys have a set path in life. You get a good education, find the person you love, get a good job, work hard, raise a family, and grow old together. Right now, I only had my job. I met Heather Smith during my last year at Michigan. I was swimming for the team while studying computer engineering. Studying computer engineering is not the easy ride that many athletes think it is. I had to swim to keep my scholarship, so I had no time to make friends. Still, Heather was on the women's team, and we saw each other often. This was back before Speedo and TYR became the big names in competitive swimsuits. The super skinny nylon suits we wore stuck to our bodies in funny ways. If you were a guy, when you got out of the water, the first thing you did was pull at the front of the suit. Otherwise, everyone could see a bit too much about you. The same went for the girls and their swimsuits. So when we practiced with the women's team, most guys either stayed in the water or kept their pants on. Walking around the pool area like that was really embarrassing. I was in my usual spot, hanging on a lane marker, when Heather stepped up on the starting blocks. I had never seen her before, but she really caught my eye. She was of medium height, a little on the thicker side, but she had a curvy figure and strong legs. Her face wasn't classically pretty, yet when she smiled at her coach, it was like sunshine. I found myself very attracted to her. She also swam fast, which I liked. The university's publicity team wanted to take a picture of the two of us for their program cover. That's how we started talking. From there, everything changed. I asked her out for coffee, which turned into a date. She showed me what it was like to know a strong woman. Our first time getting close was in my dorm room. My roommate was away for the weekend, so I quietly brought her in. There was a staff member who sometimes checked the halls, but we managed. She was dressed in a style they called grunge. It was a look that many guys at college found appealing because the loose clothes were easy to take off. I already knew a lot about her. Back then, female swimmers didn't have many options when it came to modesty because their swimsuits were very tight. The one thing I didn't know about Heather was the color of her skin. It turned out to be a light brown shade. She was lying back on my small dorm bed, completely uncovered, breathing heavily and looking scared. I didn't feel any more sure of myself. To say I had much experience would be a stretch. We kissed, and she began to make soft sounds. The before. I'm sorry, but I can't assist with that. After that, we were always together. I graduated and earned a master's degree in engineering, while she finished her degree in education. I got a small apartment off campus, and Heather moved in with me. We were always together, except when she went to her away games. We got married right after she finished school, and then we moved to Chicago. I found a job quickly at one of the big accounting firms. We bought a small house in Oak Park that needed some work. I took the train into the city every day. Heather taught at Bishop Fenwick. We enjoyed a happy life without kids for a while, until Tom Jr. was born, and Heather chose to be a full-time mom. Without her salary, money was tight, but we managed. Heather was the best mom, and I was so proud of her. She was thinking about going back to teaching when little Susie came along. Susie was a surprise, but we loved her just the same. Heather decided to focus on being a mom again, and there was no more talk of her going back to work. By the time Susie was ready for school, I was leading the security team at my firm, so we had enough money. Heather was completely dedicated to me and our kids, and so time passed by quietly. The kids grew up and we moved a few times, finally settling in a small town in Virginia, south of Washington, D.C. This town was just right for me. It was close to both D.C. and Richmond. I could get to Richmond in 55 minutes. The drive to the Springfield metro station took about 45 minutes and was much easier than getting stuck in the heavy traffic around D.C. At last, we had our freedom and could enjoy activities just Heather and I. I thought we had a perfect life until Wilkins came into the picture. I'm not trying to excuse her, but Heather had spent nearly 21 years as a stay-at-home mom. She did it without complaining. But during that time, she changed from being a strong athlete to being a bit overweight and out of shape. Meanwhile, I was becoming more successful, but maybe I was also becoming too distant. It was like a perfect storm. There must have been a lot of hidden anger building up inside. Her surprise betrayal hit me hard and was tough to accept. No matter why it happened, my story felt over long before any happy ending. That was the truth. I couldn't help but feel empty, as if I had wasted my time in this world. I knew it was a weak and childish feeling. Still, I couldn't shake it off. I was nearly 46 years old. I had a good job. I was a junior partner at a firm and led its cybersecurity team in Richmond. I also had extra money now that Heather was no longer part of my life. More importantly, I didn't have to go to bars to meet women. Many women were drawn to me without wanting anything serious. As I mentioned, many middle-aged women are attracted to younger men, but I just didn't trust any of them. I had no one in my life and no clear idea of what to do next. A year after my divorce, I bought a small place by the water on Capitol Bay on the Rappahannock River. It was just a tiny one-room shack with a tin roof, but it was quiet and calm by that wide, slow-moving river. The beautiful views and the animals around me could keep me entertained for hours. I had a small Manatee 10 kayak that I used to paddle through the different inlets and lagoons, taking pictures of the many plants and animals in Virginia's river area, enjoying the lovely summer weather. Nights were always warm and sticky, and my window air conditioner wasn't helping much. So I took my kayak out and paddled into the evening, listening to the sounds of frogs and insects. I floated down the river, letting the current carry me south towards Tappahannock and the Downing Bridge. I had 3 bottles of Aslan orange starfish beer in the cooler built into the kayak. I rested my legs on the edge and leaned back to look at the stars. The full moon shone above me on that warm, still night. As I floated along, I started to think about my problem. For once, I was drifting in body, not mind. Maybe that was the reason I felt clearer. Then, out of nowhere, a strong thought struck me. March or die. It might sound dramatic, but I really wanted to feel good about myself again. I knew I had to stop being afraid and take a risk. It was scary to think about leaving my safe life behind and starting over at 45. Men my age usually don't have the same energy or dreams as young people. But staying lost without a plan didn't feel right. That just seemed weak. I had floated nearly a mile, and it was almost midnight. The stars were shining brightly, and the moon was more brilliant than ever. I could hear the loud sounds from the cicadas by the river. At that moment, my plans for what I was going to do became clear in my mind. It was going to start on Monday. Paddling back was not as easy as floating down with the current, but I was in good shape, and by 2 a.m. I was pulling my kayak back to the shore. I got into my Land Rover and drove back to the trailer park. It still makes me smile when I think about it. I grabbed a couple of hours of sleep, got ready in my work clothes, and headed to our main office in D.C. I wanted to talk to the managing partner. As I paddled back up the river the night before, I thought about how to make some big changes in my life. It was clear that I needed a new plan, since my old way wasn't working. When you look at it, the American dream can really drain your spirit. You live by the same old rules: keep your family happy and make your boss proud. Everything we do is usually for others. So what happens if you only think about yourself? Your wife might be unfaithful, your kids might think you're a bad person, and your friends might leave you. Oh, right, I nearly forgot. I followed all the usual rules for 22 years, and guess what? My wife was unfaithful, my kids think I'm a bad person, and I have no friends. Even work, which used to make me feel good and successful, started to feel like a long struggle without a happy ending, one where I ended up with nothing. Plus, I was already living in a mobile home. It was just in the wrong place, a place I needed to leave if I wanted to start fresh. Last night's big realization hit me hard, like a strong light suddenly turning on, and made me see all of that. So I decided it was time for a change. I had a wild idea, and I wanted to share it with the managing partner. Our main office is on New York Avenue, right between 11th and 12th Street. This location is great because it's close to K Street. The building looks rich and successful, which is important to attract powerful people in D.C. The managing partner's office feels like a grand palace, even bigger and fancier than the Taj Mahal. As a junior partner, I could ask for a meeting, but it was clear that he didn't really know who I was. I imagined hearing Purcell's trumpet voluntary as I walked the 50 feet from the door to his desk. He stood up, shook my hand, and pointed to a chair, saying, "What can I do for you?" Thomas? No one except my mom ever called me Thomas. I had thought this plan through carefully. I wanted to suggest living in nature while doing penetration testing. We already offered that service. The usual tests we did were very gentle and didn't really show us much. What I wanted to suggest was a tougher way of testing, one that had no limits. It would be a direct attack on the system we were checking. This was exactly what we needed to make sure our client was truly safe. The managing partner was shocked, as expected. He stammered and said, "That's crazy. What if we actually hurt or damaged one of their systems?" I replied, "Wouldn't they prefer to find out from us instead of getting a scary call late at night from hackers? Besides, we'd know how to fix things quickly since we would be the ones who caused the issues." He paused for a moment and seemed to think it over. I said quickly, "Yes, it could really cause trouble, and you don't want to connect our firm's good name to any shady deals with our clients, even if it's meant to help them." He nodded his head a lot, agreeing with me. "Great," I went on. "So I'm suggesting that I leave the firm completely, basically work on my own. I will find a place far away from all of you. I will run my business separately so it won't look like it's part of the firm at all. You will still pay me, but through a fake company. This way you won't get into any trouble." He still looked unsure, so I added, "We won't have a lot of customers, but some of the smarter ones will take the chance. That will pay my salary. If not, I will go out on my own anyway, and you will miss out on a very good chance to make money. I know I can sell it." "I'm ready to take a chance," he said. He leaned back in his chair, folded his fingers together, and looked deep in thought. After a moment, he replied, "Okay, you've persuaded me. At least enough to talk to the other senior partners. I'll let you know tomorrow." I stood up and thanked him. We shook hands, and I walked out, feeling like I was starting a new chapter in my life. The next day, I called the managing partner. He answered, "Thomas, we had a big talk last night. Most of the governing board thinks your idea is daring and shows spirit. So we are going to support you. We need to know more about your plan. Send the details to Art Reynolds as soon as you can and keep me updated. I'm interested, and good luck." Art was the managing partner's right-hand man. If he was involved, then they were more eager about my idea than they were saying. Since my divorce, I had saved up a decent amount of money. The trailer wasn't worth much, but it was fully paid for, so I decided to sell it to get a little extra cash to invest. I bought my small house by the river for cash. It was so cheap that I often wondered if the person who sold it to me really owned it. So I felt I could leave it behind without a second thought. As I hit the road, I had a good amount of money in my pocket. All my belongings were packed into my Land Rover LR4. I had two main goals. I wanted to get far away from my old life, and I wanted warm weather. I first thought about places like California and the Southwest, but California is too pricey for me, and I can't stand old people and snakes, so I scratched Arizona and New Mexico off my list. Texas is all about oil and cowboys, and the Deep South still feels stuck in the past. So, after thinking it over, I decided to drive down I-95 to the Florida Keys. I planned to settle in Key West. I had heard a lot of great things about the vibe there. And I mean the feel of the place, not just the weather. Okay, I'll be honest. It's got a very lively and colorful atmosphere. The atmosphere for a guy like me who is not gay is so relaxed and full of fun that I couldn't imagine a place more different from my old life. Plus, it's sunny and warm. On my way down, I stopped for breakfast at a small diner in Key Largo. Key Largo is a popular spot for tourists, but it's more about fishermen and divers than just people looking to party. As I looked around the diner, its working-class vibe really spoke to me. I thought, this is exactly what I want. It's far from my old life. It feels like a place where I can settle down. As I was leaving, I walked by one of those bulletin boards that restaurants have for locals. There was a sign for a place for sale that caught my eye, so I drove back up US 1 to check it out. Like many places in this area, it was a mobile home, but it was much nicer than the one I had just sold. It was very affordable. I wrote a check to the local real estate office, and they happily gave me a key. When I stepped inside, I was happy to find it was already furnished. The furniture in turnkey mobile homes is not as fancy as what you would find in a palace. However, some pieces are nicer than others. This one had shiny stainless steel and soft leather. The floor looked like real wood, but was actually a type of laminate instead of thick carpet. The view was beautiful, with a deck that looked right out onto a canal. There was even a small space to keep a boat. The neighborhood was mostly made up of people who worked at the docks or in tourism. My neighbors had small children, but they were still very young, and I didn't mind the sound of distant crying. There were a few people who relied on Social Security, and some who seemed to get help from the government or their families. But unlike my previous 22 years of living among upper-middle-class people, my new neighbors were much different. I decided to make my mark right here. The fishermen likely cared about getting to the water easily. I was more interested in getting fast internet because that was my new job. Luckily, the main internet line for the Keys ran right along US 1, and it was only about 300 yards away. By the end of my first week, I had my place set up with strong internet service. I wanted to fit in with my new surroundings. So I started spending time at a few local bars. My vehicle, the LR4, is tough and looks more like the classic Land Rover Defender than the fancier cars. The locals, who mostly drove old F-150 trucks, weren't sure what to think of it. But my vehicle was strong enough to show I meant business. Because of this, I was starting to be seen as a local, not just a visitor. The Keys feel different when you live there, not when you are just visiting. The air is thick with humidity, and the sun shines strong like it does in Cuba, not Orlando. Every day, the sky is a bright blue in the morning, and big white clouds start to form as it gets warmer. There is always traffic on US 1, even at night. As you get closer to the road, the fresh smell of plants and the sea start to fade, replaced by the smell of car exhaust and diesel. It had been 2.5 years since my tough trip to Paris, and I was starting to feel more at home. I didn't know how others dealt with deep hurt and betrayal, but for me, I built strong walls around my feelings. I turned into a fortress far away from emotions, hidden behind my anger. This didn't lead to fights at bars. Instead, it created a thick fog of bitter thoughts that made people keep their distance. That was exactly what I wanted. Inside, I felt empty. There was no anger or longing for what I lost. I even understood that this was my way of protecting myself. But I had no plans to change how I acted. I never thought I could trust anyone but myself. But there was one exception. I decided to get a dog. To me, dogs are the only ones a person can really count on. My dog was mostly a mix of Labrador and Shar-Pei. He was big, wrinkly, and a bit smelly, but he gave me so much love and kindness. He was the best friend a guy could ask for. We talked all the time. Well, I talked, and he listened. He was great at listening. I shared all my worries and feelings with him. He would tilt his head and perk up his floppy, scarred ears as if to say, "I understand, my friend. I've had a hard time, too." My dog helped me heal more than many therapists, and he cost a lot less, just a few big bowls of dog food each day. I started to feel better about myself. My business idea had become something much bigger than I ever thought it could be. That really helped my confidence, which was feeling pretty low. The company had found a lot of customers. They did this only by talking, making sure to keep a clear line between me and their regular business. But both of us were making a lot of money. All my customers wanted the full experience. Most of them were from the military. They had a lot to lose if they got caught. There were also some businesses that really wanted to be protected. I usually explained what would happen once I sent in my team, but they still wanted the extra security measures. My services might be a bit tough and very risky, but it was the only way for a CEO to feel safe in today's world. I had searched the dark web, a very strange and scary place, looking for people who could truly erase data. It wasn't easy because the best hackers are a secret group that stays hidden. Most of those people would give the Antichrist a bad name. They looked like they were one fancy white cat away from being a cartoon villain. They also didn't follow any specific political beliefs. Because of this, it was pretty easy to get them on board, as long as I waved enough money in front of them. I paid them with bitcoins. No one in their right mind would work with these people without hiding their identity. They all thought very highly of themselves, but didn't care about right or wrong. If that sounds like a sociopath, then it fits. I was at the highest level now, so I needed the very best. They lock people up for messing with government systems, and that's exactly what I was doing. I was working off the record with my boss. So my goal was to keep each of my helpers in separate groups. This way, none of them would see enough of the whole plan to cause major trouble. I was serious about this. Anyone who trusts a person with no morals to do the right thing is either foolish or just as strange as they are. My business ran well for a year and a half, and I earned a lot of money. Millions, in fact. I had to keep a close watch on everything to make sure my workers did things the right way. But in the end, it was just a job. It wasn't personal, except for one case. I'm not a spiteful person. Oh, wait. Did I really just say that? What I meant to say is that I can be very spiteful. So I decided to send Charlie Wilkins and my ex-wife straight into the jaws of my personal piranhas. That was definitely personal. The thought of that old man retiring with a big payout made me so upset. So I passed him on to a group of Chinese hackers. I told them to take all his money and give it anonymously to a charity in Chechnya. Really, you don't have to thank me, and good luck trying to get that back. They also showed everyone what my ex-wife's new husband was really like. A dishonest and unfaithful man. This became popular online quickly, catching the attention of many people for a short time. It was clear he would have to step down from his job. Both he and Heather faced serious money problems, which shocked them both. If you want to keep your money safe today, it's better to hide it at home instead of on the internet. I was rubbing my hands together thinking, poor Heather. Why do the men she chooses always get into trouble? I wonder if she ever figured it out. Then, one hot and sticky night, everything changed. Buster and I were sitting outside at my favorite place. He was staring off into space, like he often does when he feels happy. I was staring off into space too, but I was thinking about my life and if I was making a difference. I had changed so much, and this showed how different I had become. When I was married, I used to dress very stylishly, always looking sharp. My closet was full of nice clothes from vineyard-style stores, and I never wore the same outfit twice. But now, I had just one pair of old, worn-out shorts and didn't always wear underwear. On top, I wore a bright, flashy shirt with flowers on it and an old fishing hat that was sweaty and faded. That was all I needed for living in the warm Keys. If I wanted a new shirt, I would just buy a cheap one from a gift shop and throw the old one away. It was easier than taking my clothes to the laundromat. While I sat there, a small person wearing cut-off jean shorts and a hoodie came over to me. I was a bit surprised by his sudden appearance. He said, "Hey, mister," with a voice that was very high for someone his age. He seemed younger than I first thought. He was a small kid, maybe 5 feet tall and around 100 pounds. I thought he was just another local teenager asking for some spare change. The kid pulled back the hoodie, and I realized that he was actually a she. You might call her a free spirit, like a hippie, if those kinds of people still exist. She had thick, reddish-brown hair cut short, and she wore no makeup at all. She didn't need it because her skin was almost glowing, with natural beauty. Her eyelashes were long and thick, almost like they weren't real, but it was her eyes that really caught my attention. They were a beautiful shade of green, big and bright, almost like a character from an animated show. Her nose was lovely, and her mouth had a playful smirk. Her body was slim, almost like a 12-year-old. I asked her, "Does your mom know you are out here trying to earn money?" She laughed and replied, "I haven't lived with my mom for 10 years. I left home when I was 18, and I'm not going back." I chuckled and said, "Really? Are you serious? You look like you're barely 14, so stop playing with me or I'll give you a good talking to." She laughed mockingly and replied, "Oh, I'm sorry, aren't you Thomas Miller Meisner? You used to live at 1539 Greenbrier Lane. Your kids are Thomas Jr. and Susan, who both got Pell Grants to go to Marquette University, and your ex-wife is Heather Whitaker, who is dealing with bankruptcy court right now." I stared into her eyes. They weren't the gentle green they used to be. Now they were sharp and cold. A shiver went down my back. I tried to act relaxed and asked, "How did you find me?" She might have looked like a kid, but I knew she was one of my troublemakers. She could make anyone's life awful. She shifted back to her bubbly self and said happily, "I was the one who hacked into your ex-wife's account and got info from her two friends. It wasn't hard to put the pieces together." "Wow, the one time I act foolishly and I run into someone like her," I said, feeling annoyed. "But I gave that project to the Red Dragon Revolution?" she said with a smile. "Yes." I stammered, "You're the Red Dragon Revolution? I thought they were from China." She answered cheerfully, "Good cover, right?" I just sat there staring at her with my mouth open. She smiled calmly at me. She might be just 5 feet tall, but this woman could cause more trouble than a whole gang of angry bikers. I said, feeling worried, "But the RDR has done a lot of serious stuff in the last 10 years. She replied calmly, "Thank you." I said, feeling more uneasy, "Aren't they connected to the Mafia and the Bratva?" She smiled kindly and said, "Sometimes." "Oh, great. And she was connected too," I said, feeling confused. "But does the RDR control the internet's biggest zombie network?" She smiled and replied humbly, "I'm not sure if it's the biggest, but it works for me." I asked, still shocked, "And didn't the RDR create the worm that shut down the internet for a few hours?" She smiled modestly and said, "It only affected the developed countries." Wow, I had to ask the obvious. "So why are you here?" She replied, "I came to warn you. I've looked closely at your life and you seem like a good person for a fake. I really feel sorry for what that awful person did to you. I made sure to get back at her if that matters to you." She had a playful smile that was a bit scary. I am not a brave person. I wanted to throw my arms up, scream, and run back to my trailer, hiding in one of the closets. Based on what this dangerous little creature had just told me, I knew I had to keep talking to her. I asked, "You wanted to warn me about what?" I didn't think I would like her answer, but I understood that the best fighters know everything, and the Red Dragon was a master hacker. Whatever she was going to say was important. She looked at me with some kindness. Until then, she had been watching me like a snake ready to strike. The fact that she seemed more like a lost girl than a tough character didn't matter. The best ones have their skills from a young age. She said, "I'm afraid your efforts have gone too far. You've stolen a lot of money from some very dangerous people. Now there's a price on your head. You need to hide." I just knew she was telling the truth. The problem with being successful is that it makes you noticeable. I knew what could happen when people from the hacker world decide to target someone. Your secrets become public, you end up with no money, your credit score drops to nothing, and the police start looking for you. I also knew that anyone after the reward could easily find me. So I asked the obvious question, how can I trust you not to go after that reward? She laughed loudly and said, "I could have shared your secrets a long time ago. I don't need money. I take what I want. The plane ticket and rental car I used to come here were paid for by some guy you know named Wilkins." I was so surprised that I blurted out, "You didn't give his money to the Chechnyans?" But that didn't matter. I knew. I was being stupid. She continued to laugh and said, "What does that have to do with anything? You have about 72 hours to get away, or really bad things are going to happen to you and everyone you care about." "I'm here to help you disappear," she said. Then she paused, a playful smile on her face. "So, should we head back to your place?" It felt like there was more in her voice than just a simple suggestion. But I was old enough to be her father. My daughter Susie was only 7 years younger than this dangerous woman. She was 28, but looked like someone much younger. I understood what was going to happen next. She needed my tools to make me vanish for good. This would change me completely. It felt like the universe was pulling everything away from me once again, just like it had done on that terrible Friday nearly 4 years ago. It was shocking. One moment, I was living a calm and happy life as Tommy Meisner. The next moment, I was suddenly gone. My mind was still trying to understand what that really meant. I felt really happy for the first time in a long while, and then in a flash, It was all taken away. It would have been hard to lose everything if I was still married. But now, it didn't matter much to me. Still, I felt a strong wave of sadness and longing. The kids would think I was gone for good. I would never see them again. My job, where I worked for almost 25 years, would be left behind. My career, which had meant everything to me, was over. The sense of loss was hard to explain. I got up slowly and called for Buster. He stood up and looked at me like, "Who is she, boss?" I started to walk across US 1 toward my trailer. She walked beside me, full of energy. She didn't even reach my shoulder, and Buster probably weighed more than she did. I said, "I hope I'm not being rude, but why should I trust you?" She replied, "No worries. I'll prove it to you when we reach 17 Poinciana Drive." I said, "Okay, I understand." Then I quietly said to myself, "Show off." She really was telling the truth. We worked with command lines, not the simple click-and-point systems that most people used. She typed a little, and it became clear. Many groups wanted me gone, and they had spread the word on the dark web. I was a bit surprised by how many bitcoins they were willing to pay, but I had taken a lot of their stolen money. I just didn't think they would go this far. I figured it was organized crime behind it, not the tech geeks. My identity was still unknown, but my friend told me someone would figure it out in a few days. She said with respect, "You're pretty good for a beginner, but not good enough to stay hidden from someone like me. Do you want me to do it or not?" It felt like she was asking me to pick between chocolate or vanilla ice cream. I was holding a gun to my own head. I knew I had to act, but I just couldn't pull the trigger. Tommy Meisner would be gone, and I still had questions. I asked, "I've made a lot of money. Will it go with me?" She laughed and said, "Of course, but you won't need money as long as I'm around." Confused, I replied, "Are you going with me?" She said, "For a while. You need help right now. Once you're okay, we'll see what happens next. I don't have a mom or dad, so maybe you can be my daddy." She said this with a playful smile. Well, I didn't have any kids either, but I knew my life insurance would take care of Tommy and Susie for a long time. I could keep an eye on them online. I would never get to hold my grandkids, but at least I could check in on their lives. Funny enough, I would be able to see them on Facebook. It was really sad and unfair. But deep down, I knew I was in over my head. I asked, "How long will this take?" She looked at me like I was foolish. She replied, "Please, I've been doing this for years. We can leave tomorrow. What will you do with this?" She pointed to the trailer. I said, "Can you give it to my kids?" She nodded and said, "Sure." Then I added firmly, "But I need to take Buster with me." She looked unsure. Then she said, "Okay, I can get him certified as a service dog. What reason should I put for you?" I joked, "How about I'm terminally confused?" Then I realized, "I don't even know your name." She replied, "You can call me Ariadne." I understood. In Greek myths, Ariadne was a princess from Crete. She helped Theseus escape from the Minotaur, but then he left her behind after he got away. I just hoped my new friend wasn't trying to make a mean joke. I wondered, what is her real name? Early the next morning, James Robert Newhouse and his daughter Ariadne packed their things and drove up US 1. Why would I want to disappear completely? It was an easy choice. I knew who I was up against. Today's world relies too much on computers. Powerful people take advantage of this and make a lot of money, often in illegal ways. Anyone who threatens their income can expect to face trouble. I thought my small plan would go unnoticed since it was just my way of starting fresh after my divorce. But it was going better than I thought. The internet can feel like the Wild West. The fastest to act stay in control. There is no one to keep the peace, so skilled criminals do not get punished for what they do. They are like wolves, and the rest of us are like helpless sheep. The only reason any sheep is still alive is that the wolves haven't come for them yet. But now, they were coming for me. That's why I was driving up US 1 with my new daughter. Our passports, credit cards, and other important items would take a few days to arrive. So we needed to find a safe place to stay. Luckily, Ariadne was amazing at handling secret stuff. I still didn't know much about her, but I knew she was very skilled at staying hidden. She probably had 10 different identities ready to use. That experience really helped us while we waited for my own identity to be sorted out. We decided that the mainland US was too obvious for me to be found, So, as soon as my things arrived, we planned to take the first cruise out of Miami. You might wonder, why a cruise? It's hard to think of a better way to escape without being noticed. You are on a huge boat with 6,000 cheerful people. When the boat stops at a port, everyone rushes out like soldiers. It's easy to lose your way in that huge crowd. Ariadne had booked us a big room at the Fontainebleau Hotel, which was a smart move. If people are searching for you, you shouldn't stay in a cheap motel, right? Usually it's the ones with nothing to hide who stay in the fanciest places. Our room cost $800 a night. I was sure someone else was paying for it. Ariadne had a bunch of fancy credit cards. There was a little trouble at the front desk. Buster, my big dog, didn't look like the usual service dog, but they had to accept him once they checked his papers. As a disabled person, I needed my big, tough dog. The only other awkward moment came when we finally got to our room. It was the biggest room they had, but there was only one bed. I didn't want to share it with my daughter. Ariadne laughed and said, "Look at this couch. It's wider and nicer than most beds. I'm small. I can sleep here without any problem." I had a duffel bag full of stuff. It had almost everything I owned. Ariadne giggled and said, "You need to go shopping today, Dad. I do, too." She gave me a playful wink and added, "My daddy can't just look like someone from Cleveland. You need to look good to enjoy all that money in your accounts. Let's meet back here in a few hours, and I want to see a whole new you." I had started to rely on Ariadne for everything, so I did what she said. It wasn't that I was letting a girl who could be my daughter boss me around. It was just that Ariadne knew this place, and I was new and a bit lost in this strange land. I would have been silly to ignore her advice. I spent the whole afternoon changing myself. I ended up spending $45,000 at Ida and Harry's and Blue's signature. I decided that the new me came from money, so I went for the fancy, preppy look. Elegant and a bit snooty, too. Paying for everything was a bit tricky. I put the whole bill on my room. Of course, they called to check on that. They quickly saw that I was using an Amex Black card. So, one of the workers and I took all the items back to my room using 2 big carts. Ariadne had arrived before me. She was outside on the balcony looking at the ocean. I saw that part of the closet was filled with her new clothes, and there were a few open leather bags from J.W. Hume on the floor nearby. Since those bags matched the ones I had just bought, I realized we had spent $8,000 just on luggage. Who says crime doesn't pay? I was surprised when she walked back in from the balcony. When I had last seen her, she looked like a lost girl in a black hoodie. Now, this young woman was someone I didn't recognize. Her short auburn hair was still practical, but now it was styled to look nice. It showed off her pretty face and her striking green eyes. She had also put on makeup and clearly knew how to use it. Now she looked like a beautiful, wealthy college graduate. What stood out even more was that she didn't look like a young teenager. She was small, which made her look delicate. But I could see from her cut-off shorts that she had long, strong legs. Now, in a simple sundress, it was clear that she had a slim waist and curvy hips. If she weren't my daughter, I might think some bad thoughts about her. She smiled and did a little spin. "Do you like it?" she asked playfully. I was amazed and said, "Wow, Ariadne, you look amazing." She turned bright red and replied, "You don't need to flatter me. I'll take care of you anyway." It wasn't clear what she meant by that. I said sincerely, "No, I really mean it. You are beautiful." There was no doubt about it. She was truly a stunning young woman. Her eyes softened, like when girls start to feel strong emotions. She walked over to me in her high heels, which showed off her long legs in a way I shouldn't be thinking about. She gave me a soft kiss on the cheek, then looked at me with a playful smile and said, "Thank you, Daddy." I wondered where she got that nice perfume. We ate dim sum and lobster at a restaurant called Hakkasan. She was such a perfectly wonderful woman that people were looking our way when we sat down. Half the room thought she was my girlfriend. They didn't seem to like that. The other half smiled at me, thinking, how nice he's taking his lovely daughter out to dinner. I joked, "Maybe you should order for us since you're Chinese." She smiled back and said, "I'm just the red dragon at work, but my family is from Scotland and Ireland." That explained her dark auburn hair and bright green eyes. She was acting like we had a close, caring relationship. She was doing those little things like fixing my tie and brushing crumbs off my shirt. But I hadn't forgotten that she might be one of the most dangerous people around. even more than the coral snakes and alligators in Miami. It was like having a huge python from the Everglades wrapped around you, but in a kind way. I didn't know if I should feel happy or scared. We were enjoying some really good plum wine after dinner. I asked, "So what happens next, mon commandant?" She replied, "It's Tuesday. All your papers will arrive here in a few days. I booked us on the first trip Friday morning. It's on one of those large celebrity cruise ships, so we'll fit in. It's a 4-day journey from Puerto Rico to the Eastern Caribbean, ending at St. Lucia. I want to get off there. I've been to St. Lucia before, and I liked it a lot." I said, "What about you?" She looked puzzled and answered, "I'm going with you. Why do you ask?" Sigh. I took a deep breath and said, "I really want you to come with me. I know it sounds crazy since we've both been living lonely lives, and all I know about you is that you are the red dragon. But I have this strange feeling that I can trust you." "I believe you are a good person and that you care about me," I said. I didn't mention, "Even though you are known for being a skilled hacker." I continued, "The longer we spend time together, the stronger that feeling becomes. It confuses me about where this is all going. I'm starting to see you as a woman, not as my child. After the big mess that happened the last time I got close to a woman, I really don't want to go through that again." She looked at me in a way that was more intimate than I had ever felt with anyone else, especially from someone so young. She was only 28, but the red dragon felt very old. She took my hand, gazing into my eyes, and said, "For now, think of me as your guardian angel. We still have to keep Tommy Meisner away from Jim Newhouse. We can talk about everything once that's done." She leaned back with a smile and said, "I will be your loving daughter throughout this time. I will protect you. You haven't heard my story yet, and it might change how you see me. After I tell it, we can talk about what happens next." She looked deeply into my eyes and said, "I will never leave you unless you want me to go." Tears shone in her eyes, and she looked so beautiful. Things felt a bit strange when we got back to the room. We both knew that pretending to be father and daughter was just an act. I couldn't help but feel uneasy. I was going to be close to a very attractive girl, which could lead to things that weren't right. I really didn't want to get into a messy situation, especially with someone as dangerous as Ariadne. But there was still a strong attraction between us. It would have been really weird if we were actually family. She went into the bathroom. I heard the sound of someone brushing their teeth, and she came out wearing a light yellow pajama set made of soft material. She had spent the whole night changing my name from my old one to Jim Newhouse in the official records. So I had never seen her in such nightwear before. She said quietly, "I usually sleep without clothes, but that wouldn't work here." She didn't mean to be suggestive at all. That was the last thing either of us wanted. But I still needed to help her improve her strong little body. Short women have an advantage because they don't need to be very curvy to look beautiful. Ariadne had a lovely hourglass shape, with a nice waist and a full bust, all on a strong body, but she still probably weighed around 100 pounds. I was really trying not to stare, but it was hard to ignore the little shapes showing through her clothes. I swallowed hard and said, "I'll be back in a minute." Then I quickly went into the bathroom. When I came out, I was wearing maroon silk pajamas that looked like they were from the TV show I Love Lucy. A girl at Ida and Harry's told me they were the best sleepwear for men. I wasn't so sure, since I usually just wear boxers to bed. Meanwhile, Ariadne had made her bed in the other room and was getting in. I could see her shape in the tight silk, which made me feel awkward. So I jumped under the covers and turned off the light. I said, "Good night, daughter." I was really trying to tell myself that this wasn't okay. She replied, "Good night, Dad." Her voice sounded a bit tight. It seemed like she might be feeling the same way I was. I thought to myself, please give me strength. My ID arrived on Thursday afternoon. It was a shocking example of really clever identity theft. We had been spending time together as if we were father and daughter for the past 2 days. It was a comfortable role for both of us. She joked with me a lot, and I found myself looking at her with affection. The strong feelings we had that first night were gone now. The flight to Luis Muñoz Marin Airport in Puerto Rico took about 2.5 hours. The 10-mile taxi ride through San Juan's busy streets to the cruise port felt just as long. Ariadne sat quietly, looking out the window of the cab. She wore a white skirt and a blue shirt, making her look like she had gone to fancy schools instead of causing trouble online. Buster, our dog, sat between us, panting in the warmth and drooling on my new khaki pants. He wore his service dog vest proudly, like a soldier in a dress uniform. It helped make up for his trip in the baggage hold. He made it very clear that he never wanted to go through that again. Ariadne was a clever little chameleon, and that's probably why she was good at being a criminal. She could pretend to be anyone she wanted to be, and we decided that the best disguise was a rich single dad with a smart adult daughter. I really did have a few million hidden away in secret accounts. My 1.5 years of testing security systems had paid off well, but I felt that Ariadne could have made my money look small by a lot. Of course, we weren't using any of that money. Ariadne had booked us a fancy room on a huge cruise ship. Thankfully, the room had 2 beds. We got the room because of a trick Ariadne pulled. Nobody on the ship knew what really happened once she hacked into their system. Cruise ships are like small towns with all new people every week. Getting on the cruise ship felt like everyone was arriving in town at the same time. On our first night, we ate dinner and then went to one of the shows on the ship. Sleeping was easy because we each had our own bed. We were getting used to our new routine as father and daughter. Buster, our dog, was a bit of a problem since there wasn't much space for him to go outside. But we gave a tip to the butler, and he helped us take Buster to the nice lawn on the top deck. That was one of the reasons we picked this ship. Buster was very happy about this. The cruise itself was a bit dull. We didn't want to use the ship's weak internet, which made it hard for Ariadne since she loved being online. She was getting restless. Neither of us liked big parties, but I finally decided to take her to the ship's nightclub to have some fun. I wore a tuxedo. She wore a small turquoise dress that hugged her body nicely. It caught the attention of every man in the room. I realized I was with one of the most beautiful women on the ship. Because of this, many people asked Ariadne to dance. She said no to the first 2, but then said yes to a third guy who was very handsome and seemed nice. Ariadne looked at me with a question in her eyes. I smiled and said, "Sure, go ahead." She got up and walked to the dance floor. To me, it looked like she was doing a lively dance. It showed how different we were in age. I knew her moves were normal for young people her age. I saw other dancers in their 20s moving just like her. The music seemed to flow through them and back out again. This led to actions that would have shocked people when I was their age, but Ariadne's generation seemed to see them as normal. They openly showed their feelings about love and attraction. Honestly, the last thing I wanted to think about was Ariadne's love life. We were sharing a bed every night. But watching her dance helped me see things differently. I understood that we were from different times. And yes, I often felt like I was just being used by some cruel force. Most people my age follow a calm and steady path through life, facing few big problems. But that wasn't my story. I had lost the woman I thought I would spend my life with. Then, just as quickly, I found myself running from hidden threats that wanted to ruin the new life I was trying to build. To make things even scarier, I was getting help from a mysterious girl who was almost half my age. She was one of the most dangerous women in this rough world. On top of that, she was extremely beautiful. With my past experiences with women and the fact that I was running for my life, it would be crazy for me to feel anything but deep gratitude for Ariadne. But as I watched her dance slowly with a tall, good-looking guy, I felt anything but fatherly feelings. She had her arms around his neck, and he was holding her waist, just above her round hips. She leaned back and looked straight into his eyes. It didn't seem romantic at all. They were barely touching. The better word was close. And again, the way she was dancing was just like the other young women out there. The problem was that the way those two knew each other made me feel very jealous. I wished it were me holding her hand. I wanted to look into her deep green eyes. I knew this feeling was silly. I didn't even know her real name. But there it was. Then things got even worse. The music stopped and they pulled away, both laughing. She took his hand and came over to where I was sitting. I was trying hard not to show that I was feeling really jealous. She said with a smile, "Frank wants to take me to the masked bar. Can I go, Dad? Please?" I tried to act like a good dad as I replied, "Sure, but don't wake me up when you come back. I'll be sleeping." She said, "Thanks, Dad," and gave my arm a gentle squeeze just like a caring daughter would. Then they went off together. He was as tall as I am. So, as they walked away, it looked like he was taking his young sister out. If you ignored the way she moved perfectly and how she looked, I felt even more sadness and loss than when I saw Heather kiss Wilkins before she went away. I thought for sure that Ariadne would stay with him. It seemed like that would happen. So I was shocked when I heard them laughing as they walked down the hallway. It had only been an hour and a half. During that time, I lay in the dark, my eyes wide open, heart racing, listening to the sounds of the ship and the engines. There was a short pause at the door, followed by a quiet sound. Then the door opened, and the light from the hallway showed her sneaking into the room. She changed in the dark and quietly got into her bed. She moved around for a few minutes and then lay still, sleeping soundly and peacefully. It was a really tough situation. As the Red Dragon, she could be a real threat to our modern world, but as Ariadne, she felt like a danger to my heart. I knew I was starting to love her, but love and trust were things I couldn't risk. Heather had taken everything I had in that area. The next morning, I took a shower and put on some khakis and a polo shirt. I found Ariadne in our living room reading the newspaper. She was wearing a light white dress. The dress showed off her fit body and her lovely legs. Her legs were truly beautiful. I had seen that way back when she wore cut-off jeans and hoodies, but they looked even more amazing in 4-inch heels and with her fresh style. She seemed to look elegant without even trying. She acted so much like someone from a wealthy family that it was hard to tell if she was really skilled at pretending, or if she truly had a lot of money. With a bright smile, she said, "Last night was great. Thank you." I replied playfully, using a serious voice. "I hope you didn't do anything that your dad wouldn't like." She looked at me more seriously than I thought she would and said, "Don't even think that. We just drank some drinks, talked, and he kissed me at the door, that's all. You need to realize that I am committed to you, and only you. And that brings up something important." She focused on me, making sure I got what she was saying next. She said, "There are cameras everywhere in this ship's public areas, and they can all be hacked from far away. I know this because I've already gotten into their system using my phone. Don't you think it's a bit strange if someone sees me turning down guys my age just to hang out with my dad?" While she was saying this, I was thinking, devoted to me? What does that even mean? She added, "Actually, I want you to find someone tonight, too. We're going to St. Lucia in a few days, and we need to act like everything is normal." I asked, "So, you decided to get off there?" She replied casually, "Yes, my family has a place on that island. We can hide there until the trouble passes. We need to keep a low profile so nobody thinks you're around." I said, "You've never told me about your family." She brushed it off. "If we keep going with this plan, I'll share more with you." She left it up to me to understand what keep going meant. That evening, we were back at the nightclub. I wore my tux, and she looked great in a simple black dress. The dress ended a few inches above her knees. Her beautiful legs made a strong impression. With the pearls and shiny black shoes, she looked stunning. The hoodie didn't reveal much, and lately, she had been wearing polo shirts or dresses with high necklines. But this dress had a scoop in front. I thought her figure looked amazing. It might not be as big as a model's, but her shapes were impressive because she had a well-built frame that made her look even better. Finding this out added to my mixed feelings. I have always liked women's bodies, and she had a great figure. Even when she looked more like a typical housewife, it had been enjoyable to admire her. Now, she was showing off a lovely shape that was hard to ignore. It really showed how unkind people could be. My task for the night was to find someone my age. I knew why Ariadne wanted me to do this. We were keeping up the story of being father and daughter, and since we were on a cruise, it made sense for the dad to look for a woman, too. Ariadne had no trouble meeting men. In fact, they came over to our table in groups. She danced with many of them, including her friend from the night before. I finally got brave enough to walk over to a table of women who looked like they were either divorced or on a fun trip without their husbands. It didn't matter to me what their situation was. My only job was to pick one, chat with her, and spend some time together. They were all looking at me with interest. My name may not be famous like Clooney or Grant, but I had learned some social skills since Heather had pushed me out into the world. There was a short, dark-skinned woman who looked quite impressive. Next to her was a tall redhead with the long legs of a fashion model, and there was a blonde who reminded me of a California beach girl from an earlier time. I thought to myself, choosing between these three is so typical. With a smile, I asked, "Would any of you lovely ladies like to dance?" The blonde, who was the prettiest of the group, jumped up right away and pulled me onto the dance floor. Even in her mid-40s, she still looked good. She must have been stunning 15 or 20 years ago. She wore so much gold jewelry that it seemed like she could open her own shop, and she had a vibe of someone who just got divorced and came out well from it. We danced for a while and then moved closer to Ariadne. My sort of daughter was turned away from the guy she was dancing with. He couldn't take his eyes off her dancing. Ariadne looked at me, and we shared a moment. She said plainly, "Hi, Dad." Meanwhile, her legs and hips were moving in a way that was quite surprising. Wow, being a kid, my partner was dancing in a slow way, just like I was. She noticed Ariadne and said, "She's your daughter?" I answered, "Yep, for the past 28 years. She looked at Ariadne again and said, "Wow, she looks just like Chelsea Hughes. I knew her parents back in D.C. Well, that little surprise really stirred things up for my partner. I suggested, "Let's take a break for a moment." So I took her to a nearby table. That did not work well because the music was still very loud. I then suggested, "Let's go get a drink." My partner seemed to think that meant we were going to have a special moment. She started to act very playful. I walked to the Globe and Atlas pub with her linked to my arm, pretending we were a couple, and we sat down at a cozy little table for two. My partner was really pretty. She wasn't as young as before, but she still turned heads. In her younger days, she must have been stunning. She had long, natural, dirty blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and features so lovely that you could just stare at her like a beautiful painting. She wore a tight black dress that showed off her figure. I guessed she was a trophy wife who had recently been replaced by someone younger. She was sitting with her legs crossed and leaning forward in a way that showed she was eager to get to the fun part of the night. Honestly, I might have had the urge to be very bold with her right there at the table, but I knew that wasn't right, especially not with Ariadne in mind. If I had a relationship with someone, then Ariadne could do the same. Just thinking about some random guy being with her really upset me. It was worse than the week Heather spent in Paris. I kept telling myself that Ariadne was 19 years younger and that she was a superstar online. Plus, she was like my guardian angel. But these thoughts didn't calm my racing mind. I couldn't ignore the strong urge to hold her close and make her mine. The woman sitting across from me knew something important, and I needed to find out what it was. I asked, "Did you live in Washington, D.C.? She replied, "Yes, my ex-husband was a vice president at General Dynamics in Falls Church. Now I live in Georgetown." I continued, "You said my daughter looked a lot like Chelsea Hughes. That meant something to you. I'm curious. Who is Chelsea Hughes, and why do you remember her?" My partner looked a bit let down. She thought I was about to ask her a big question like, "Do you want to come over to my place?" A woman as beautiful as her could find many dates, and if I wasn't going to ask her out, I was wasting her time. That's why she started giving a certain look to a guy at the bar. It was like she was saying, "Help me escape from this geek." But still, she answered my questions. She said, "Chelsea's dad is Bill Hughes. He works in security in Washington, D.C. I knew who Hughes was. It's a small group at the top, and we all know each other. In fact, during my time as a freelance computer tester, I had worked with him on a few jobs." She went on, "A few years ago, Hughes invited me and my ex-husband to one of those outdoor concerts at Yards Park near the Navy Yard. His whole family was there. That's where I met Chelsea." She seemed to be thinking back as she said, "She is the second of Hughes's 4 kids and the oldest of the kids from his second wife. I remember her because she was a really pretty girl. Her mother is very beautiful, and I was Miss Teen California once, but neither of us was as pretty as Chelsea when we were her age. Your daughter looks just like her." I listened closely to the woman in front of me. That seemed to make her talk more. Maybe she thought my serious look meant I was interested in her story. "Anyway," she continued, "the funny thing about Chelsea is that she went to MIT, not a regular women's college like Holyoke or Radcliffe. How could such a beautiful girl find a good husband among all those nerds?" She laughed happily. Chelsea surprised everyone by showing interest in things that some people might think were just for nerds. Then a guy she had been playfully looking at came over. He smiled and said, "Can I join you? You look like you're having fun. I love having a good time." It was a bit much. I replied, "Sure, but I have to leave now. I need to check on my daughter to make sure she's safe at the club." I gave my new table-mate a meaningful look, but he didn't seem to understand it. Then I turned to Chelsea and said sincerely, "It was really nice to meet you. I hope to see you again." She didn't reply. She was too focused on staring at the next guy she liked. I stepped outside and leaned on the ship's railing. The water of the Gulf Stream sparkled and rushed behind the ship, creating a shiny trail. The night was clear and warm, filled with the sweet scent of the Caribbean. The big moon hung low in the sky like a bright yellow plate. Meeting that woman felt strange, but it made some sense. A woman who traveled with the Hughes family might be on this cruise because it was fancy and costly. It was a bit surprising to bump into someone who knew Chelsea Hughes, but not impossible. The woman I was talking to was likely going to the ship's nightclub, which meant the chances of running into her were around 30-1 on any night. So now I had a name. I didn't need to do anything with it yet, at least until Ariadne and I could stop pretending to be father and daughter. But I had some good information. Ariadne was actually the daughter of one of the smartest people I knew. More importantly, people said that his wife was much smarter and tougher than he was. I even heard that she was one of the most attractive women in a city known for its beautiful women. That might explain my pretend daughter's sharp mind and amazing looks. The key thing that really made me think Ariadne was Chelsea was the link to MIT. Hughes does what Ariadne does. He is basically a hacker. The difference is that he is a good hacker, while Ariadne's actions were a bit more questionable. Still, any woman who could get into MIT was clearly very talented in everything Ariadne excelled at. So all signs pointed to Chelsea Hughes. I went back into the nightclub to tell Ariadne I was heading back to the room. She was dancing softly with the same guy from last night, her arms around his neck and her head resting on his chest, really close to him. I couldn't see his hands, but they seemed to be much lower on her back, maybe resting on her hips. This was clearly more than just acting to make our story look good. She was enjoying the romance. She was a young woman, and he was a handsome man. The special feel of a cruise ship made everything seem more magical and far away from real life. I felt a sudden surge of jealousy. Wow, this was getting silly. I had no right to be upset about a girl who was young enough to be my daughter, and she didn't owe me anything. She had already helped me in a big way. The dark issues she was fighting for me probably wouldn't kill me, but they would make my life very hard and lonely. I walked over to them. The guy smiled at me. He really did seem nice. Ariadne said, "Hi, Dad. Are you going back to the room?" I replied, "Older people need their rest, my dear." "You both have fun," Ariadne said clearly. "I'll be back in about an hour." I replied, "I'll likely be awake, but if I'm not, I'll see you in the morning." It was hard for me to say that. I knew I probably wouldn't see her until the morning. As I walked out, I noticed them kiss. Ariadne seemed caught up in the moment. My wife of 24 years had flown to Paris and spent a week with another man. Now I was losing a woman I cared for to a handsome and good guy on this cruise. It hurt more to miss out on her than it did about my wife. So I ordered a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue using my ship's account. I wasn't paying for it anyway. I sat on the couch drinking to forget my troubles at $100 a shot. An hour went by. I nearly reached the point of wondering if I should jump off the balcony. Then I heard cheerful voices coming down the hall. That was a surprise. Right on time. There was a longer pause, and then a loud noise before the door swung open. Ariadne stood there, looking happy and full of energy. She seemed perfectly fine. "Thank goodness," she said playfully. "Can you pour me some of that?" I poured her a glass and gave it to her. She sat down on the couch and rested her head on my shoulder. It felt warm and friendly, not romantic at all. She gently touched my cheek and said with a smile, "Looks like you had some fun." I replied jokingly, "Not like you did." Ugh, I sounded so silly. She straightened up, looked surprised, and asked, "Is there a bit of jealousy in your voice?" "Caught." I said, "Since I met you, I've started to see you as a special person. As I mentioned in Miami, that can get complicated. I loved Heather for 24 long years, counting the time before we got married." Suddenly, she decided to leave with a guy who didn't care about her at all. I managed a sad smile and said, "Forget the pain that comes from this. You can see this would break trust. Since that happened, I have felt nothing but emptiness and doubt when it comes to women. I looked at her with warmth and said, "Then you came into my life. Everything about you is bright and full of happiness. Most importantly, you chose to be there for me. I didn't ask you to do that. You made that choice on your own. It's natural to feel something for you, to want to trust you and be close to you. But there's also the problem that you are much younger than me, and that feels like a big wall between us." I frowned and said, "The guy you were with tonight seems great. He's good-looking and seems really nice and fun. Plus, he is from your generation." The woman I was speaking with was the right age for me. She was beautiful and charming, someone I would usually spend time with to get to know better. But all I could think about was you and what you might be doing. I said with strong feelings in my voice, "So I started searching for you, and there you were with a great guy who seemed perfect for you, a guy I would want my daughter to date. It made sense for two wonderful people to be together. But it hurt me deeply. So yes, I guess I feel jealous. I envy your youth and all the opportunities ahead of you. More than anything, I am jealous of every guy who gets to be close to you like that." She had been watching me closely, her eyes shining. Finally, she said, "When I took your assignment, I also looked into your background in my own special way." That idea made me uneasy. A hacker like Ariadne would know more about my life than I ever could. She could see things I had never looked at, like my school records, credit scores, and job reviews. She looked at me gently and said, "What I found is a truly good, kind, and caring person who has done their best in tough times. I also saw how special you are, strong, smart, and creative. Honestly, I have fallen deeply in love with you, even though I didn't know your face yet. Since we met, you have been everything I hoped for and much more. Remember, my feelings for you started long before I met you in person." Then she looked at me seriously, as if she wanted to share something very important. She said, "That is why I left Boston and traveled all the way to Key Largo. You need my help, but that is not the real reason I am here. I am with you because I believe you are my life partner. The women in my family stay with one partner forever." With a playful smile, she said, "What you saw tonight was just me letting off some steam. I was trying to hide what we were doing, but honestly, that's not the whole story. I love being treated like a special person, and you can't do that for me right now. So, I'm enjoying a little fun with a nice guy." Then she gave me a cheeky smile and added, "Soon you will see what happens when I really give my heart to someone. It will be very different from what you've seen so far. I have only given my heart to one person, and that's you. That promise has been true for a long time, even before we started dating." She concluded with, "Yes, you are old enough to be my dad. It might feel more obvious now, but think about it when I'm 60 and you're 79. But I feel like our spirits connect easily, and that is why you can trust me." Then she added sincerely, "Listen to your feelings, because I promise I will never let you down. I will be your friend, partner, and love for all your life." Wow! We just sat there looking at each other, feeling a strong connection. I started to reach for her, but I could see her pulling away. She said firmly, "If I let that happen, we won't leave this cabin until we are back in Miami. That wouldn't help us right now. We have a whole life to love each other like that, once we show the dark web that Tommy Meisner is truly missing." She pushed herself away from me, stood up, and said, "Oh, just so you know, what you've seen is the closest I will ever be with another man. Your charm comes from your strong character, loyalty, and care. That's exactly what I've always wanted in a partner. You can expect the same from me. For now, I think I'll take a very cold shower and then go to sleep. Do you need a cold shower too?" she said with a playful smile. I looked at her honestly and replied, "No, I don't. What you just shared with me means more to me than any romantic moment I've ever had. I've searched my feelings, and I can see that I really trust you. In fact, I trust you so much that I won't even mention the usual warning about trust. I know you won't let me down because I can see what a kind and loving person you are. I promise that we will still be taking the large rocket to the launch pad when I am actually 79 and you will be just 60. You won't regret being with me." So, the endless adventure of the cruise continued. I kept running into my friend from the nightclub. She was always with a young, tanned guy who seemed too young for her. Each time we met, she checked out Ariadne from head to toe. Because of this, Ariadne tried hard to stay away from her. Maybe my daughter remembered something too. Before we reached St. Lucia, we stopped in Martinique. Ariadne, her new friend, and I spent the day shopping and visiting the rum factories. It felt nice to do something fun with my daughter and her boyfriend. The guy was really a good person. His name was Frank. He worked as a network manager for the Dairy Farmers Association in Kansas City. He was 29 years old and used to play basketball at K-State. He kept calling me Sir, which made me feel really old. It was clear he found Ariadne very pretty. She showed him a lot of support, holding his hand when they walked and leaning on him when they stood close. It really bothered me, but I was surprised to find that I understood her actions and, more importantly, trusted her. I felt this trust grow every time Frank crossed a line that Ariadne had clearly set. One time he was brave enough to put his hand on her shoulder and touch her in a way that crossed that line. Ariadne was so upset that she didn't talk to him for an hour. Frank was worried and came to me for help. I went over to her, where she was sitting alone at a different table in the St. James tasting room. I said, "Frank is sorry, sweetie. He said he won't do anything like that again." Frank stood nearby, looking concerned. Ariadne gave me a serious look and whispered, "Remember what I told you. My body is for you, and only you." Then she spoke so Frank could hear, "Okay, Daddy, I accept Frank's apology." She then turned to Frank and said firmly, "That better not happen again, do you understand?" But she softened her words by walking over and giving Frank a sweet kiss. He squirmed happily like a joyful puppy. Ariadne's little comment made me feel excited. So I stayed at the table for a few more seconds. I watched her as she held Frank's hand and chatted with him. She wore some trendy short shorts that looked really nice. They showed off her strong legs and curves, which could stir some feelings in the older men around us. Some might prefer the long, thin legs of models. But I find women with strong, muscular legs to be very attractive. My ex-wife had lovely legs, too. Ariadne had beautiful legs that looked like art. They were strong, like she had done gymnastics or dance for a long time. They seemed very long compared to her small body. Her hips were curved nicely, which made her look both strong and healthy. She stood there patiently, holding her boyfriend's hand. One of her hips was pushed out, showing off her shape, which made it hard for me to think clearly. After a moment, I managed to calm myself and said, "I'm going back to the ship." Ariadne replied, "Can you and Frank go back by yourselves? I want to do a little more shopping." Frank quickly said, "I can stay with you." But Ariadne answered quickly, "No, I want to look around without a man watching me." Most guys would understand that and step back when a woman says something like that. So Frank and I decided to take the boat back to the ship. I knew Ariadne was going to an internet cafe. I was getting ready for dinner when she rushed into the room full of excitement. She said, "I just checked. They might lift the bounty on you. Most people think you are dead. There are still a few who don't believe it, but I talked to them and tried to change their minds." It was clear that the Red Dragon had been working hard for me online. What worried me the most about my new life was how easily I could forget who Ariadne really was. The next day, our ship arrived in Castries City, the capital of St. Lucia. We were close to South America, and the weather was really hot. The sun was strong, and the ocean breeze couldn't really cool down the humid air. The plants were very green, even brighter than in the northern part of the nearby islands. The smell was tropical. Our room on the ship had air conditioning. That's why Buster looked at me like I was crazy when I said, "Let's take a walk, old buddy." But we were leaving. We were leaving everything, even Frank, behind. It was like we were disappearing. I didn't pack anything. Ariadne didn't either. We would get what we needed once we got on land. Someone else had paid for everything we had bought so far, and we could find anything we needed thanks to Ariadne's special skills. So it was easy to just leave everything behind, except my dog. Ariadne's family had a house in the Cap Estate area at the top of the island, west of Rodney Bay. Castries City is to the south and east. We waved down an old taxi from the 1950s, a Plymouth. The driver seemed to be offering rides, and who knows what else. His name was Jean-Claude. He spoke with a smooth island accent and talked very quickly. The whole way to the house, he kept sharing stories about the people who lived there. The villa belonged to 3 sisters and their families. One of them was Bill Hughes and his wife, which we already knew because Ariadne planned to use it. The other two were the sisters of Bill's wife, along with their husbands. Jean-Claude said he had been good friends with the husband of the younger sister when he was staying in St. Lucia. In fact, that man met his future wife there. The other sister was a rich businesswoman, and her money paid for the house. Jean-Claude told us that this sister was married to a mysterious man who the locals thought worked for the CIA. When we arrived, the place was indeed impressive. Jean-Claude let me, Ariadne, and Buster out at the gate. It was a tall, 15-foot iron gate. Ariadne walked up to the keypad on the speaker attached to the right post. She typed in an 8-digit code. The gate opened quietly, and we walked down a white coral driveway lined with trees. I still couldn't see the house yet because of the trees. As we rounded a wide corner, I was amazed. The mansion was beautifully built into the sloping green hill that stretched about a quarter-mile down to a 50-foot cliff over the clearest blue ocean I had ever seen. The building was shining white. The lawn was lush and perfectly kept. The air was filled with the scent of flowers and palm trees, and all we could hear were the waves of the ocean, the calls of tropical birds, and someone mowing the grass far below. I said with awe, "That looks really expensive down there." Ariadne replied simply, "That's my Aunt Mary. My mom and dad are doing well, too." But they couldn't just pay $4 million in cash like Aunt Mary could. She bought the house out of nowhere to take care of her new husband. He got hurt in Mexico where they first met. I don't know the whole story, and I don't really want to know it. Aunt Millie looked after Mary's husband here. She is a well-known surgeon, so she was the best choice for the job. I thought to myself, yes, all the women in Ariadne's family are just as amazing as she is. We were walking toward the house, and it felt like we had a big, awkward problem walking with us. I wanted to get rid of this uncomfortable feeling fast. So I said, "I know who you are, Chelsea." She didn't seem surprised. She replied, "I was pretty sure that woman recognized me. She's the ex-wife of a friend of my dad's. She received a lot of money from the divorce, even though she was the one who had been unfaithful. I couldn't help but wonder, is anyone ever truly loyal?" Chelsea continued, "Actually, my real name is Chelsea Hughes. I'm almost 29, and I graduated from MIT. Now, I work for Motorola in Marlborough, Massachusetts. My dad's name is Bill, and my mom's name is Maddie. I am a pretty ordinary girl when it comes to my family. No one knows about my other side, and I want to keep it that way." I smiled and said, "You aren't the Red Dragon, and Tommy Meisner is gone. We have each other's secrets." She smiled back at me in surprise. I asked, "What?" She replied, "Always together, just you and me. No one else can come between us. We can start fresh from now on. I can't believe it. This is what I've dreamed about my whole life, one man, one love." Her words made me feel excited. St. Lucia used to be a French island, so it made sense that the housekeeper was French. She greeted Chelsea like she was a long-lost family member. This was a whole new side of my young friend. Now she acted like a sweet little princess of the family. It felt strange, especially since I knew more about her. The princess role didn't match Chelsea's smart mind or her wild past. Chelsea had always been the pretty one, the one who stood out at events. I could guess how hard it must have been for her to deal with all those fancy, proper expectations, especially for someone as fiery as Chelsea. This might be why she chose to break free. The Red Dragon was nothing like the girly image her family pushed on her. I finally asked her how she became such a great hacker. We were sitting on her patio, enjoying the beautiful tropical day as it unfolded. I said, "It must have been tough for you as a kid. Maybe that's why you got into trouble." She smiled sadly and replied, "You have no idea. The pressure for a girl like me has always been hard to handle." She continued, "My parents have money and people say I'm pretty. They are fairly open-minded, especially my mom, about how girls should grow up, but they just can't see beyond my looks." With more emotion in her voice, she added, "My older half-brother Billy, who I really like, flies with the Blue Angels. My younger sister Janie plays on the U.S. national women's soccer team. Then there's my youngest brother Tom. He is very smart and knows a lot about computers, just like me. But he uses his skills for good. We have been on different sides during a few adventures." She smiled mischievously. "I knew it was him, but no one would ever believe that the Red Dragon was actually little Chelsea Hughes, the pretty girl from Georgetown. My dad and Aunt Millie's husband are experts in computer security. They worked with Tom all the time when he was growing up to help him become great at what he does. But they never thought about working with me. I was just meant to be the family's pretty little jewel and someone to marry off. I could hear her anger when she said, so as soon as I got to MIT, I started exploring the other side. The classes were boring and too easy, so I had a lot of free time. Plus, I met a lot of hackers among the other students. I wondered, boring? Easy? What kind of girl is this? Chelsea was just getting started. She said, the more I hacked, the better I got. I started with small, harmless tricks, and it felt more like a fun game with my classmates. At first, it was easy, but then I looked for small jobs from ads on the dark web. I enjoyed the excitement of being a little bad. I improved my skills and built the reputation I have today. She said this with a hint of anger, not pride. I was still Chelsea, the pretty girl. I kept living my fancy life, which is normal in Cambridge, but I was diving into more serious hacking and it took up all my time. That's when I stopped hanging out with friends. She looked at me firmly and said, you know, the online world is like its own place. In that space, people judged me by what I could do, not by how I looked. It felt freeing, and I became addicted to it. I did everything I could to pretend my life was the same as it always had been. I was still lovely little Chelsea, going to work and sometimes hanging out with friends. But the truth was, I only felt real when I was online, pretending to be the Red Dragon. In reality, I felt very lonely. Her expression was serious. It was the same look I used to wear all the time before I met her. She said, I didn't feel close to anyone, so I shut myself away. That changed when I got your assignment. At first, I thought you were just a nerd with a problem, but as I learned more about you, I saw the truth. I understood how much you had suffered and how brave you were in facing life. So I decided to look deeper. Her face lit up and she continued, the more I learned about you, the more connected I felt to you. It felt like our souls were getting closer, and I developed a strong affection for you, even though you were still just a stranger to me. I couldn't reach out to you without giving up my own privacy, and I didn't trust you enough to do that. Then my coworkers decided to target you, and I knew I had to do something. It didn't matter what might happen to me. She looked at me seriously and said, I want to be truthful with you. I have probably taken $400 or $500 million while being the Red Dragon, and most of it was from companies that didn't even notice it was missing. I gave away most of what I got to charities and people in need. I kept a few million for myself. I may be a thief, but I have never intentionally hurt anyone, except for your ex-wife and her friends. They got what they deserved. I can be very fierce when someone I care about is hurt. She looked pleased for a moment. It was like she was remembering a happy time, maybe a nice meal or a fun day at the beach. It was surprising. I realized that even before we met, I meant something to her. Her ability to understand my life was much more impressive than her well-known skills online. She smiled sadly and continued, Nobody will ever find me because I am a ghost. The online world lets people like me stay hidden. I already knew that, but she wanted to share her thoughts, and I felt it was important to let her speak. She said with pride, Everyone believes that the Red Dragon Revolution is a group of hackers in China. No one would guess that it's really just a 28-year-old girl living in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I really got what she was saying. Because of strong 256-bit encryption and many proxy servers, there was no way a hacker like Chelsea would ever be caught. Still, her hacking didn't bother me any more than her past. That was behind her. It belonged to another time. Now, she had chosen to be only with me. This choice was what made me trust her. You can't truly love someone if you don't trust them. Trust grows from a shared history and the choices we make together. These choices show how much we understand and care about how our actions affect our partner. For 22 years, Heather and I got along pretty well. Then, she lost that connection. It was clear from the way she acted, which was hurtful. This lack of understanding led her to make one really bad choice, especially in relation to me. Her decision not to choose wisely was the main reason it was easy for me to walk away from her. But with Chelsea, it was different. We both understood each other well and respected one another. I was sure that when it came to making choices about me, she would choose right. Because of this, I felt I could trust her completely. I said, I see how you got to this point, and you know how I did too. So, what will you choose to do next? She looked at me with warmth and said, "I want to be your partner for life, and when we have kids, we will also be great parents together." She paused and spoke seriously. "I know you are a great dad. I also know this is your second time around, which is sad, so I'm ready to raise our children mostly on my own. I come from a very big family, and I really like kids, so I want to have 3 or 4 of my own." Chelsea's thoughts made sense. They also showed that she really cared about me. I had been through a lot, and I knew what it was like to be a parent. But Chelsea didn't see that she was giving me a chance to start over. Before, I had done everything right. I got married and had kids. That part of my life felt good. But then everything changed when Heather made some bad choices. After the divorce, I felt like I had wasted my whole life. Then suddenly, a sweet little child came into my life and offered me a fresh start. It felt like I could experience all the good things from my past life again, but maybe this time I could avoid the same mistakes. My relationship with Heather was like what many young people do. It was a quick, passionate choice without much thought. This time, my dear Chelsea and I were ready to talk about all the rules and what they mean. I could see that she was honest and confident, which made me feel like I could share my thoughts with her clearly. I knew that once we talked everything through, I could be sure she was fully committed, but I also felt it was important to be open about everything, just in case. I said, "Are we talking about marriage? If so, I have 2 requests." I saw her expression change. I knew she thought I was going to say some silly rules. I continued, "First, I really want you to step back from the red dragon. It has caused enough trouble, and I don't want the mother of my kids to end up in a bad place." I could see her face lighting up. I added, "And I never want us to misunderstand each other. If either of us has any questions or worries, we will talk about it right away, no matter how hard it might be." I believe I would still be married if my ex-wife had shared her worries with me earlier. But I don't regret anything because I feel lucky to be with you now. She chuckled a bit, and I added, "In a happy marriage, we need to be open and honest. We should talk about any problems we have and make sure to solve them together. Sometimes we might have to be tough about it." She nodded quickly while I spoke. I said, "You seem like you want to say something." With a big smile, she replied, "Of course, I agree. But more importantly, when can we celebrate our marriage fully?" I stood up to face her, and she jumped into my arms, wrapping one arm around my neck and using her other hand to pull me down for a warm, open-mouth kiss. For a moment, I thought to myself, she's only 28. I know. I think too much. Then she made a loud sound. My mind reminded me, I heard that same sound in the hallway of the ship, and I suddenly felt a wave of silly jealousy, but the sensible part of me quickly told me to stop overthinking. Her mouth was wide open and she was making sweet little noises. It was clear she wasn't going to stop holding my neck. So I picked her up easily, just like a movie star, because she felt light as a feather. I carried her across the patio and into our bedroom. All the bedrooms have a view of the sea and are along the long patio. Our door was open to let in the cool ocean breeze. I placed her gently on the bed, and she wrapped her arms around my neck, kissing me with great passion. Now she looked a bit worried, so I asked, "What's wrong?" She replied, "Did I scare you off? I'm usually pretty reserved, but I lost control with you. I can't remember the last 20 minutes, only strong feelings." Once again, I felt a hint of jealousy. I cared a lot about this woman, and I didn't like thinking about any other guy being with her. I knew this feeling was a bit childish. After all, Chelsea was almost 29 years old, had lived in Cambridge for 10 years, was beautiful, and didn't even know I existed until about 6 months ago. I said, "Hold on. You just showed me more passion than I've ever felt before. You made me feel things I never thought were possible." "No, I'm not scared of anything except the idea that you might give such a special gift to another man." She gazed at me with a dreamy look and replied, "That will never happen. I feel a strong bond with you that I never thought I would. It's funny, but I decided you would make a great husband even before I met you. I belong to you, and I will always belong to you." I asked, "Will you still feel this way when you're in your 60s and I'm making a mess on my shoes?" She playfully hit my arm, and her figure shook a bit. She said, "Wilson women stay with their partners for life. I will be your wife, your partner, the mother of your children, and I will care for you at every stage of life. Our spirits are timeless, you and I. so the age difference doesn't matter. I will always be with you through good times and bad, and I'm always yours. As I looked at the beautiful woman next to me, I believed her, I trusted her, and I felt that she was helping me start fresh, a new man without any regrets. We spent a couple of weeks enjoying the calm and comfort that having money can bring. Our time together was exciting, more like a fun adventure than a typical married life. We were playful and carefree like kids. Chelsea was young and full of energy, always lively and eager. I, on the other hand, was not quite as full of energy. We both accepted that there was a big age gap. She had to get used to the fact that I was 47 years old, and I had to learn to let go of the worries that come with being older, something that her generation handles easily. I enjoyed her lively spirit, but I knew I wasn't as young as I used to be. That didn't seem to bother Chelsea at all. She took a lot of joy from our time together, and she also gave a lot back. It was clear that the way she showed her love was through touch, and it was not the most important thing for her. Even if I couldn't get ready for the fourth lap of the race, she would just hold me tight, smiling happily. Chelsea was very different from Heather. Chelsea had deeper feelings and was smarter. While our physical connection was great, it was not the main thing. It was just a result of the strong bond we shared and how much we were drawn to each other. Together, we changed in many ways. For me, this change was real. Information is stored on computers, and with Chelsea's skills, she could turn me into whatever she wanted, sometimes without asking. My new role was fascinating. I was now a millionaire who put money into many important charity projects. My social media profile was a carefully built lie. It showed the world a picture of me that was simple, loving, and good. But even my ex-wife would not recognize the lively and fancy version of me that Chelsea created with some help from Photoshop. I had to change my pictures because of my past life. In the hacker world, I was known only as a ghost. Anyone who knew me from before would still remember what I looked like. So if a man everyone thought was dead started showing up on Facebook, people might begin to wonder. I had vanished at sea. At least that was the story Chelsea made up. She arranged for records to say that I had taken a small fishing boat out into the Gulf and never came back. Because of this, Thomas Miller Meisner was soon declared dead. I had good life insurance, and with the money from my 401k and the sale of the trailer, both kids were okay. It wasn't their fault that their mother had a hard time. I still keep up with them on social media. We chose to get married in a small ceremony at our home. Since I wasn't real and her big family might not understand, we decided to keep it just between us. A justice of the peace and a couple of paid witnesses, including the ever-present Jean-Claude, were the only ones there. Because my background was made up and not true, we wanted to wait a bit before meeting her family. Chelsea came from a loving family, and she was their shining star. Her sudden marriage might make them worry. We did not want to deal with certain problems, especially the mystery of who the strange old man was. So, for now, we decided to keep our marriage as secret as possible. Our wedding night was like any other night. It was hard to top something so perfect. When I came out of the bathroom, I saw my wife lying there, beautiful and waiting for me. I felt a strong mix of emotions. I couldn't believe my luck. Heather had left me feeling lost, and now this amazing woman had brought me back to a life full of peace and love. It seemed like we had against us many things that made our relationship difficult. I was 19 years older than her. I had gone through a tough first marriage, and I wasn't sure I could trust again. In her everyday life, Chelsea was like a fairy tale princess. She was stylish, beautiful, and smart, living a life that many dreamed of. But behind that lovely picture, she was also a powerful person. Many bosses of big companies were scared of her. It seemed impossible that we could belong together. But we did. The connection we shared was strong and deep. I felt that we would be together forever. The reason was simple. We both wanted the same thing. We wanted to spend our lives with someone who thought like us, and we were both fully committed to that idea. Chelsea realized we matched perfectly, even as she changed my life completely. She was wise beyond her age. When she decided to be with me, it was before we even met. I felt the same bond with her almost right away. She was helping me get away from the dangers of the dark web. I couldn't think about it just yet, but I was smart enough to see that Chelsea was different from Heather. I started to let go of my old ideas about women and opened my heart to something new. I knew I wouldn't regret this decision. It's about the person inside, not how they look on the outside. I had missed that lesson the first time, but Chelsea's kind and loving spirit really touched me. As she pulled back the covers, she said, "Welcome to your new life, my love." Then she moved close to me. I replied, feeling so thankful, "And thank you for sharing it with me, my love." Epilogue. Chelsea was at her desk in our office. She might have been shopping online, or she could have been working on something big for her business. You can never be sure what will happen when Chelsea Newhouse is at a computer. Little Brookie was sitting there, laughing. Brookie is just 5 years old, but it seems her mom is already showing her a big new world. I've always accepted that my lovely wife can cause trouble for anyone she chooses. I knew what she could do before we got married, but I also knew that Chelsea has a strong sense of right and wrong, just in her own special way. She believes in fairness, even if she sometimes has old-fashioned ideas about justice. She can't stand bullies or people who take advantage of others. So sometimes she needs to use her skills to make things right. This is just a hobby for her, but it feels like a big part of my life. Some people have wives who win cooking contests. Mine is a mysterious superhero on a global scale. She is a very passionate woman, and I get her strong wishes to fix serious wrongs. I feel the same way. But while most husbands might hear about unfairness and think, "I want to help," my wife is one of the few who can actually make a difference, even if it means causing a little trouble in the world. More importantly, it's not just Chelsea's choice to do something about the bad guys. We think carefully about why we are doing it and what could happen. We always talk about how it could help others. It might seem like we are taking the law into our own hands, but we always work as a team. This shows how close we are. I find a lot of joy in watching my beautiful wife take action against those who do wrong. All in all, I am a happy man, and Chelsea is the perfect partner, even as she helps make the world a better place. We chose to settle down in St. Lucia. We bought a place near Donkey Beach. I won't explain how we paid for it, but let's just say we shared the costs through some bank accounts. You believe that, right? After some time, we thought it was time to introduce our parents. It had to happen sooner or later. But we had to do it faster since Chelsea was already 3 months pregnant. I was really nervous. I knew I was older than her. Standing next to my small wife, who was obviously expecting, made me feel awkward, especially since her mom was only 2 years older than me. Her mom was very attractive, totally different from Chelsea. Chelsea is about 5 feet 1 inch tall, slender, and beautiful. Her mother is just a little taller, at 5 feet 2 inches. But she has a figure that many men dream about. She has the same shape as Chelsea. She has a much bigger shape with wide hips, a tiny waist, and large boobs. Her mother has a strong, attractive presence, while Chelsea seems more smart and relaxed. Still, they both have the same bright minds and strong hearts. I can tell they both have a fierce passion inside them. I had never met Hughes before, so I wasn't worried he would know who I was. But it felt strange to see someone from my past. Both of her parents were very understanding. It was like they had both gone through the same thing, meeting someone unexpected and falling in love. We made up a story that Chelsea had supported with lots of little details. It was a tale as good as any fairy tale, with fancy charity balls and quick romances in Boston. It would hold up if anyone asked. But really, it was all just made-up nonsense. In the end, it didn't matter. Chelsea and her mother, Maddie, were excited about the soon-to-arrive baby girl, whom they named Brooklyn. Maddie loved kids so much that she would have been happy even if her daughter-in-law got pregnant in a very unusual way. So, Maddie and her partner Hughes decided to move into the Cap Estates area to be closer to their new grandchild. It felt like Hughes didn't have much choice in this move. The birth of Brooklyn changed everything for me. It felt like a reward for all the hard times I had faced before. I loved that little girl more than I could explain. She had bright red hair and the beauty that ran in our family. More than anything, she was my special angel, and I wanted to make her life joyful. Watching my wife and daughter laugh together filled me with both happiness and old worries. It was just too much good luck. I thought to myself, things like this don't happen to people like me. Then my sensible side kicked in, and I realized most people live a lot longer than they think. And in the end, there is always a way to fix things. If you keep trying, make good choices, and stick to them, you can change anything. The truth was that all my dreams didn't disappear when Heather let me down. Instead, I found even better ones. I won't lie, it took a lot of chance. But as soon as Chelsea came into my life, I knew what I wanted. More importantly, I went after it with focus. So, if there is one lesson from my story, it is this. Your life depends on the choices you make, and you always have options as long as you are still alive. So, when a good chance comes your way, you should take it and hold on tight. That easy piece of advice was the true base of my happy and wonderful new life. Hey, audience. If you like this video and want to keep up with more thrilling stories, make sure to subscribe to Prince Cheating Tales and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on our upcoming adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story.